You ever get that feeling that something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me when my wife of 20 years texted me while I was at work, asking how soon I could come home for a serious talk. Normally, I'd have rushed home, but that day, I just couldn't shake the feeling of unease. My staff noticed, especially Rebecca, who snapped me back to reality. As the GM, I should have been on top of everything. When I showed Rebecca the text, she wondered if there were issues in my marriage or with the kids. Nothing major that I knew of, I admitted. Has Myra's behavior changed at all? Rebecca asked. Like, does she suddenly hang up when you enter the room? Not that I've noticed, I replied, feeling like the last to know anything. Why is she home? Rebecca mused. Shouldn't she still be at work? I texted Mira, asking her whereabouts. Her response, on her way home, didn't sit right with me, so I called her office, recording the conversation. That's when I learned she'd been promoted and transferred to the corporate office, effective next week. She'd been on paid leave for the week to sort things out. But why hadn't she told us about this sooner? And why the recent training if she was already working for corporate? Rebecca, if your husband announced a sudden promotion and transfer, what would you think? I asked. Damn, Will, she replied. I'd be suspicious. He must have known for ages. That's what I'm thinking too, I said. I'm heading home, but I'll be taking everything she says with a grain of salt. Myra's got away with words, but I'm not buying everything she's selling. Rebecca looked worried, and rightfully so. I was walking into a minefield, armed only with uncertainty. I texted Mira that I was on my way home. Mira and I crossed paths in high school during our sophomore year. In a moment of youthful recklessness, spurred by a friend's dare, I planted a kiss on her lips during lunch, earning myself a loud slap and a trip to the principal's office. After that incident, we kept our distance, sticking to our respective social circles, I, a local boy, and she, a transplant from the city, always in tune with the latest from Kansas City, while I remained blissfully ignorant. Everything changed during our junior prom week in our junior year. I found myself covering for an absent employee at my father's towing business while my parents attended an important event. With 3 tow trucks to manage, the night was busy. A call came in about a drunk driver who had ended up in Mr. Thomas's cornfield, and I rushed to the scene. There, I found Mira, drenched in the rain, her prom dress ruined. Without hesitation, I offered her my raincoat, struck by her beauty even then. I got permission from the police to drop her home before heading to the impound lot. As we arrived at her house, her parents greeted us warmly, grateful for my assistance. I left, forgetting about my raincoat in the rush. Throughout the ride, we hadn't exchanged a single word. Back at school on Monday, Mira surprised me by joining our lunch table uninvited. She asked to speak with me privately, and when I obliged, she planted a kiss on my cheek, thanking me for protecting her reputation on Friday night. She mentioned returning my raincoat after school, and I explained I had gym class, so I might be late. Unfazed, she informed me that she was no longer dating David, whose father had been fired that morning. When I dropped her home after school, her father thanked me for my maturity and humorously commented on the incident with the police officer, leaving Mira embarrassed. Mira, I began, I've been misjudging you for over 2 years because of a dare, she admitted. Now I feel like a complete fool. Is there any way I can make it up to you? Can I take you to the theater on Friday night? You can even choose the movie, I offered. From that moment on, we became inseparable. My initial assumptions about her turned out to be wrong. She wasn't a snob. After high school, I joined my father's car dealership business, learning the ropes from the ground up, while Mira pursued a career in insurance, diligently working her way up the ranks, taking online courses recommended by management. By the time I knew her, she had become the assistant branch manager at her firm's location, occasionally spending a week each month at the corporate headquarters. During our journey together, we welcomed 3 daughters into the world, and life seemed good. With my father entrusting me with the day-to-day operations, I found myself spending most of my time in the office as he focused on expanding our business empire, which now included 8 Ford locations. Upon arriving home one afternoon, Mira greeted me, seemingly unconcerned, which suggested that whatever she had to say wasn't urgent. If I'm going to be home for the day, can I get out of this suit and relax? I asked her. Or is this going to take just a few minutes? This is going to take a while, so you should change, she replied. After changing, I returned, ready to hear her out. Mira handed me a stack of emails exchanged between her and Sylvia Smith, one of her female superiors at corporate, over the past week. The correspondence seemed to revolve around an administrative assistant going on maternity leave for 3 months and culminated in an offer for Mira to take over temporarily. The tone of the emails appeared coercive, as if her boss was pressuring her to accept. After scanning through them, I set the papers down and grabbed a beer. Under pressure, I accepted their offer. I start on Monday, Mira explained. I'll fly out on Sunday and return home on Friday night. Corporate has arranged a furnished apartment for me for the duration. The monthly rate was cheaper than the weekly. As I opened the beer, I noticed the papers were missing. Mira, where are the papers? I hadn't finished reading them, I asked. She retrieved them from her briefcase. Sorry, I thought you were done. Just then, her phone rang, displaying Jake's name from the office. She answered and stepped out of the room. While she was away, I quickly scanned the papers into my laptop, realizing that everything she had told me so far seemed to be a deliberate deception. There was something she wasn't being forthcoming about, and I intended to find out what it was. I texted Rebecca, informing her of what I had been told. See what you can find out, I added. Mira was still on the phone with her new boss, Sylvia Smith, at the corporate office in Annapolis, Maryland. A few minutes later, Rebecca replied, saying she'd gathered whatever information was available from Google and the corporate website. She also reached out to a distant cousin who lives in the area to see if she had heard anything. With Mira still occupied, I seized the opportunity to inspect her briefcase. As I listened for a return, I began searching through it, expecting it to be mostly empty. Indeed, it was, save for a notebook containing an address and phone number in Annapolis with no accompanying name. I quickly snapped a photo with my cell phone and closed it up. Sorry, there's been a change of plans. I'm going to have to fly out early Sunday morning, Mira disclosed upon her return. Jake has just informed me that Sylvia Smith will be personally meeting me to help me adjust before my first day. It's all decided, isn't it? I asserted firmly. Will, it's not like that, Mira responded. In fact, it is. You're too relaxed for it to be spontaneous. There's clearly something you're not telling me. If it was truly last minute, you'd be in a panic, I confronted her. That was when I received a look from her that I hadn't seen in years, not since the Stan Johnston debacle when he falsely claimed an affair between them and questioned our daughter's paternity. I grabbed the car keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mira asked, her concern evident. To pick up our daughter so they won't have to walk home, I snapped. It took me 10 minutes to reach the school. I informed the office of my unexpected visit to collect my daughters and checked our bank balances. Finding no unaccounted for withdrawals, I placed a hold notice on all checks and restricted cash withdrawals to our branch only. My daughters were surprised by my impromptu visit. After loading them up, we stopped by Dairy Queen for milkshakes and then headed to the neighborhood park for burgers and fries. During our chat, it became clear they were unaware of their mother's impending trip. Nearly half an hour later, I tried calling Mira, but her line was busy. I wondered if I'd be greeted by a different version of events when I returned home. Dad, what's wrong? Diane, my oldest, asked. Your mother informed me she's taken a 3-month position at the corporate office. She's leaving Sunday morning, I explained. She claimed it just happened this week, but other sources suggest otherwise. It seems to be a permanent promotion she's held for at least 6 months. My daughters wore expressions of shock. Are Mom and you getting a divorce? Dawn, my middle daughter, asked. Are you having an affair? Did Mom find out? Oh my God, I thought, out of the mouths of babes. No, I'm not, but thanks for asking, I replied. There's no sign of a possible divorce because none of our funds are missing. The only thing I know for sure is that she has been lying. So, when we go home, all we know is that what your mother told me may not be true. Could the people you talked to be lying? Asked Darcy. Listen to this and then tell me what you think. I watched my 3 daughters as they listened to me talking to the receptionist at my wife's former office. Sometimes it's best to allow others to form their own opinion. We all saw her go to work, Dad, Dawn said. What has she been doing this week with her free time? Your guess is as good as mine because I honestly don't know, I replied. I can find out what's going on, but I'm going to have to hire professionals, and this is going to take time. For right now, girls, we have to decide what we're going to do. We can't stop her from going no matter what, Diane said. We don't have enough info to make a serious decision. I hate it when you tell us we have to wait and see, Darcy said. Because you have to find out if you can work out before you agree. Here you can't work it out, and you may not get the info you need. Perhaps it's Mom who's having the affair, Dawn said. Or maybe she's being chased and needs to get away. Just then, my cell rang. It was my wife. Where are you? In the park, the kids are eating burgers and fries. They all got milkshakes. I figured since it was short notice, you needed all the time you had to prepare, I said. That way, you don't have to cook. We are deciding how we as a family will deal with things while you're gone. Why didn't you call me to let me know? You're making it sound like I'm not coming back, Mira said defensively. You know that's not true. I felt like screaming, but I bit my tongue. While listening to her, I asked myself why would she say that? Was that a mental slip? The kids will verify I tried to call you twice. You were busy talking to someone on the phone. I told them about your plans. They are also wondering what's going on because you're far too calm, I replied. We will see you when we get home. I texted Rebecca, saying, find out who lives at this address and check the phone number out, attaching the photo of it. Less than 5 minutes later, she responded. It was Sylvia Smith's residence and cell phone number. It was heartbreaking watching my children talk to their mother. Each one of them tried very hard to get their mother to tell them the truth. We just heard her explain the same thing over and over. Sunday morning, after seeing her leave on the plane, I began to relax. Little did my wife know, my father and I had a private investigator on her tail. My mom and dad came over Sunday to see how we were holding up. It was hard for my kids to accept the fact that their mother had been lying to all of us for over 6 months. No matter what you tell a child, they automatically assume it's their fault. There were times my own mother had to leave the room to hide her emotions. On Monday, after dropping off my daughters, I drove around the block, parked my car, and walked back. I asked if I could talk to the girls' guidance counselor, Karen Wilson. I explained what had happened over the weekend and asked her to watch over them in case their emotions came out and they couldn't get them back in control. She said she would and complimented me for being so observant about their needs. When I got back to the office, I read what Rebecca had found out on Sylvia Smith. Her father was the chairman of the board. She herself had worked her way up through the corporation after joining it as an actuary. She was now the president and had been so for 4 years. The week was rough, but my kids and I bumbled our way through it. The 2 ladies we used occasionally agreed to help. They would come in and clean house and do laundry twice a week. Mira had called the girls twice and me once. She came home Saturday morning and left Sunday afternoon. Her total time at home because of plane schedules was less than 24 hours. After we saw her off, all my daughters discussed between themselves what they were trying to figure out. Why had she bothered to come home at all? It was like she was here but wasn't. Her mind was on other things. She was their mom, but she wasn't. I couldn't argue with what they were saying. I had tried to hug her and was treated to a cold wall of ice. I realized that during this time, her family was being extremely quiet. It made me wonder what they had been told. We had just about reached our home when my cell rang in the car. It was my father. Hi, Dad. We just saw Mira off. I thought I'd take my daughter out for pizza later. Want to join us? I said before giving him a chance to speak. No, I just wanted to remind you we have that lawyer's appointment set for 9 tomorrow morning to review that dealership I want to take over, he said. Hi, girls, Grandma and I send our love. Over my shoulders, the girls and he talked for a few as I drove towards our favorite pizza shop. My dad had gotten my drift and had changed the conversation. I was thinking, nice save, Dad. Later, once the girls had each showered and headed to bed, I called him. We got the first report, Will. It's not as bad as we thought, my dad said. It's worse. The affair started long before she was there for the month training. We got videos of them together in bars, dancing, holding hands, and showing public affection in a very sensual nature. Hell, they even got a video of them going to an adult shop buying erotic toys. I was devastated, but I had to know. What's his name, Dad, and what does he do for a living? It's not a male, Will, it's her boss, Sylvia Smith. They are living together as wife and wife, my dad said. Mira took off her wedding ring as soon as she boarded the plane the first time. I dropped the cell phone, unable to talk. I was emotionally lost. From out of somewhere, Diane picked up the phone. She told her grandfather I was a wreck. I guess she forced her grandfather to tell her the truth. For the next few hours, we just cried together until there were no tears. Mom and Dad walked in at 6 that morning to find Diane and I still holding each while asleep on the living room sofa. After making coffee, they woke us up. I was still waking up and gathering myself when Diane spoke. Grandpa, am I old enough to go after those individuals with my own lawyer? Can I sue their employer and both of them jointly and separately? Diane asked. My parents and I were stunned. Her remark was the last thing we expected. Yes, I believe you are, but we will have to verify that with a lawyer qualified in that field before I give you a definite answer, her grandfather replied. Where did that come from? With Dad's approval, I'm taking law in school as an elective, Diane said. I'm going to legally hold Sylvia and my mother accountable if I can. I have had my learner's permit for almost 2 years, but can't get an unrestricted driver's license until I'm 18. My goal is to become a lawyer. That comment woke me up. I went into the den and fired up the computer. Going to Facebook, I typed in my wife's name. It produced 2 Facebook pages, the first I knew about, the second I didn't. Her mistake was she had used the same photo. It had been opened 8 months ago. When Dad saw it, he called the private investigator firm and left a message about what we had found. Within an hour, it had been hacked. It gave pages and pages of events, times, and places, which were also verified by Sylvia Smith's Facebook page. Both could be used in court. They had admitted their 8-month lesbian relationship on their personal Facebook pages. Each one's page declared them to be the spouse of the other. Myra's second Facebook page had no reference to the kids or me. I did not realize that Diane was reading it at the same time I was. Mom's living a double life, Diane said over my shoulder. The question I have to ask is which one to her is real. Mom made a late breakfast for us all. Afterward, we told Dawn and Darcy what we all knew. I called the school to inform them that all my daughters would not be in. While I was dealing with the situation, my oldest daughter handed me the phone, saying it's Karen Wilson and I don't know what to say. I said, stay with your sisters, I will be right back. I headed into the den and closed the door. Hi, Ms. Wilson, I said, how can I help you today? I noticed the kids were called in for an excused day. I was wondering if it was concerning what we had talked about, she said. Yes, we found out that she has been having an affair for at least the last 8 months, I said. We learned that last night after she left. At that time, we were trying to figure out why she had come at all because she had been so distant and lost. Is he an older man or younger, may I ask? Ms. Wilson asked. Any idea of how I should approach this if I am asked? With kid gloves and baby steps for quite a while. It's more complicated than that, I explained. The affair my wife is having is not with a male. It's with her female boss. Oops, sorry for that slip. Your daughters and you must be devastated, she replied. For a heterosexual male, it has to be hitting you as hard as it did my parents when my brother came out. I was on the phone. Diane had gone to bed when I found out. I was receiving a first-hand brief on the investigator's report. I lost it and dropped the phone. Diane found me and asked what was going on to the person who had called me. For the two of us, it was not our best night. Add my name to your contact list, Karen Wilson said. If your wife has been hiding this part of herself in plain sight, you can expect that you have been lied about to your mutual family and friends. I briefed my dad on what Karen Wilson had said and had to explain who she was. He promptly called our lawyers, who specialized in divorce, and secured us an appointment for 1 p.m. that day. All three of my daughters prepared to accompany me. The law firm sent me an email with a file attached, which we printed out. It contained 8 months' worth of Facebook pages proving their relationship started long before her so-called month-long training session. It was fascinating to witness my oldest daughter using her knowledge of civil law to pose questions that seemed to leave the divorce lawyer speechless. It became evident that my 3 daughters were at the legal age where they could all file alienation of affections claims against Sylvia Smith and the insurance corporation if any rules were violated according to their Human Resources Employee Manual. I texted Rebecca asking if she could obtain a copy of it, and she replied that she had taken care of it last week. Her distant cousin had sent her a copy along with extensive information about Sylvia and Myra's relationship. 20 minutes later, the lawyers were reviewing it. It only applied to those within the corporation, but Rebecca's distant cousin had provided us with a wealth of information. I played the recorded conversation with the receptionist that I had saved. Between the Facebook Messenger chats, the emails I had copied that Mira had produced for me, and my recorded conversations, we could prove that they used their positions in their firm to manipulate me and my daughters for at least 6 months. As a result, each of my daughters would be suing for alienation of affection against my wife, her lover, and their employers. I would be suing Mira for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and adultery, her lover for marital interference and alienation of affection, and her employer for failing to enforce their own human relations policy. The icing on the cake was that since one of the co-defendants was the president of the firm itself, they couldn't claim ignorance. We were all shocked when Diane suggested that we needed a court order that makes it impossible for Sylvia Smith and Mira Roberts to be terminated from their job until all court cases are resolved. We didn't want the corporation to sacrifice the two of them to lessen the degree of their responsibilities. Our divorce lawyer team was shocked. It was a move they wouldn't have thought of, yet it made perfect sense. We left the lawyer's office at 3 p.m., so the 4 of us went out for an early supper. Darcy, always sharp as a whip, suggested that we needed to get new cell phone numbers but keep these ones active but shut off until they are served. That way, if our mother tries to call us, it will go to voicemail. Everyone shut off the cell phones now, Diane said. We did. She gathered them up and asked our server to take them to the hostess. We would pick them up when we were leaving. Dad, when you shared what Karen Wilson said this morning, it got me thinking. The lawyer mentioned they planned it out well. For our own protection, we need to take precautions as well, Diane stated. Considering what's available on the dark web, all our computer equipment and anything else connected to the internet should stay turned off and unplugged until they can be declared virus-free by professionals. After supper, we locked our phones in the trunk. While heading to Cricket to get new numbers and phones, I decided to buy an extra one and keep it deactivated. Before the girls went to school on Tuesday, I gave Diane the extra cell phone from Ms. Wilson and told her to explain why. On Tuesday morning, I stopped by the bank, canceled all our joint credit cards, withdrew all remaining cash from our joint bank accounts, effectively closing them, and removed my name from them. I had the funds placed in 90-day term notes in both my wife's and my names. The bank provided printed proof of everything I had done, and after making copies for myself, I dropped them off at my lawyer's office. At 9 in Maryland time on Friday, I texted my wife Mira with the recorded phone chat with her former co-worker from my old cell. It read, "This is the last time I will ever say I love you." I then performed a factory reset on all our former phones, ensuring all our contact info was removed before leaving them in the local park. Mira was with Sylvia when she received the text message. They both heard the conversation with her former office. Mira exclaimed, "Shit, he's found out about my real job." At 9:15 Maryland time, under instruction, the server served them all at the corporate office in Maryland while wearing a video cam. Mira was shocked when she opened the envelope. It contained divorce papers citing adultery and marital abandonment since her Facebook page stated she was in a wife-to-wife relationship with Sylvia Smith. It detailed evidence for the first day of court, including their visit to an adult shop and what they purchased. At 9 a.m. our time, I walked into our former cell phone server's office to report the 4 phones missing and requested the numbers be canceled on Monday morning. I then paid the current bill in full. Rebecca and I were at work reviewing my actions. I wanted a fresh set of eyes in case I had missed anything. "Will, you realize they will have to come to you sooner or later," Rebecca said. "Their legal issues are in this state. I don't think they realized that your daughters were of legal age to have their own legal representatives. Thankfully, we are one of the few states that can still sue for alienation of affection. I can imagine what Mira is doing. She'll be calling our old numbers trying to touch base, looking for a way to get herself out of this mess," I said. "I've arranged for copies of her lovers and her Facebook pages to be delivered to her parents, sisters, and brother today. Once they're opened, there can be no denying by her side of the family about what she has done." "What does your daughter want out of this?" Rebecca inquired. "Diane wants revenge. She can't shake off the memory of finding me in that state that night. She believes no one should be treated that way," I explained. "Dawn and Darcy think their mother intentionally discarded us all," I said. "All 3 feel they need this confrontation. It's tough for them to come to terms with the fact that their mother lied to them for so long. Darcy summed it up perfectly. If she did this out of love, what would she do if she hated us?" Rebecca absorbed my words, her own experience as a mother of daughters giving her perspective. I saw the pain and sadness in her expression. "Will, Mira may not realize it now, but she will. She has lost her relationship with her daughters for good," Rebecca said. "There's no going back from this. Your daughter's wounds run deep." "Rebecca, I never saw it that way, but you're right," I acknowledged. "The worst fights I've seen were between 2 women. They're relentless when it comes to grudges, aren't they?" "You're quite insightful at times, boss," she replied. On Friday morning, Diane Roberts went to school only to be called out of class to report to Karen Wilson's office. Borrowing a laptop, she scanned all the documents regarding their lawsuit against Sun America Life Insurance, Mira Roberts, and Sylvia Smith. She also included all the Facebook information. After transferring the data to a USB stick, she was prepared. "Are you sure about this?" Karen Wilson asked. "Once we proceed, there's no turning back." "Everything on this stick is already in the court records," Diane affirmed. "But what makes it newsworthy is that we're still minors. I've written a letter explaining that as a senior law student, I found the state law allowing us to take this action." Karen Wilson opened a new email account under a false name and composed a message to 26 news organizations, attaching the data provided by Diane. In the subject line, she wrote 3 minor children take on corporate America, and in the body, she explained the legal suit filed against Sun America Life, Sylvia Smith, and Mira Roberts by Diane, Dawn, and Darcy Roberts. After reviewing everything, she hit send. Diane then watched as Karen closed the email account. "When it hits the media, it'll only take one outlet to make it a big news story," Karen said. "Depending on how it's handled, it could set off a chain reaction." "That's what I'm hoping for," Diane said. "I want the woman who used to be my mother to face the consequences." "Thanks, I'm headed back to class." Karen was beginning to admire Diane's potential as a future lawyer. However, she couldn't ignore the potential consequences of the publicity she was generating. Karen wondered if Diane realized that her actions might cause the share value of Sun America Life to plummet, with some policyholders canceling their policies on impulse. With the lawsuit served that day, Sun Life would likely be scrambling to navigate civil law regarding divorce, an area outside their expertise. In Karen's view, Diane was strategically cornering them, and so far, she was executing her plan flawlessly. Within 2 hours, it became the headline story of the day. Local branches were inundated with calls to cancel policies, and business talk shows discussed the damage caused by the lawsuit against the president, resulting in the company's share value dropping. It also surfaced that Sylvia Smith had been open about her sexuality for years. Meanwhile, Mira had been trying to reach her husband since receiving his text, but his phone went unanswered or gave busy signals. His office informed her he was out for the day, sending corporate into a panic. Mira and Sylvia had anticipated a divorce, but not under these circumstances, as Mira had meticulously kept their lives separate. Karen had to reach William Roberts urgently. 3 news crews had arrived, and she needed to address the situation. "Will, we have a problem we need to handle," Karen said when he answered. "Is it the girls? Are they okay?" Will asked immediately. "Yes, they're fine." Diane found a way to release the pending court case to the media, expecting it to blow up tonight or tomorrow, Karen explained. "We have 3 news crews here now, and more may come." "Damn," Will muttered. "Any suggestions?" "Besides escorting them out, not really. They'll have to face the media eventually." "I'll gather them in my office so you can discuss how to handle it," Karen suggested. "I'll be there as soon as I can. Keep an eye out for me. I might need to put on quite a performance," Will said. Parking in the schoolteacher's lot, Will walked towards the main entrance, where he heard someone in the crowd point him out as the father. 10 minutes later, Will and his daughters emerged. Diane approached the news reporters confidently, with her family by her side. "I'll make one statement on behalf of the family until the court case concludes," Diane declared. "We won't grant interviews or answer questions while the case is ongoing. Let me know when you're ready." The media prepared, signaling for her to begin. "My family and I discovered that my father's wife and our mother, Mira Roberts, has been leading a double life for at least 8 months. We're left questioning which life is real and which is fake," Diane stated. Additionally, her lack of honesty forced us to hire an investigative firm. They found her living in Maryland with Sylvia Smith in a publicly acknowledged wife-to-wife relationship, raising questions about potential bigamy. Since Mira Roberts showed no intention of being honest with us, we're forced to conclude that in her eyes, our family is the fabricated one. We discovered that Sylvia Smith is not only Mira's lover but also her boss and the president of Sun America Life, Diane stated. It raises questions about whether Mira got her promotion by trading sexual favors. If so, it reduces her to nothing more than a paid prostitute. Has my mother been a lesbian all her life? Was my father just a cover because she wanted children? Did she ever truly love him? Did she ever love us? Why does she refuse to acknowledge us as her daughters in her other life? Is she ashamed of creating us? My sisters and I agree that the woman we knew as Mira Roberts, our mother, is dead. This reinvented version of Mira Roberts is a stranger to us and always will be. That's why the mess Mrs. Roberts and Ms. Smith have created is heading to court." We walked back to my car, my emotions the whirlwind of pride in my daughter's courage and shock at the revelations she had brought to light. Diane had raised moral and legal questions that shattered any remaining credibility Mira had. During a 2-hour drive to ensure we weren't being followed, each of us was lost in our thoughts. My dad had all our electronics checked for safety, but nothing was found. Sylvia called Mira, informing her that things had gone from bad to worse and urging her to see what had just aired on TV. As Mira watched, she was devastated by her daughter's coldly delivered indictment of her life choices. Despite Sylvia's attempts to comfort her, Mira was inconsolable. Stopping at a small diner about an hour away, I went to pay the bill, only to be told it was already covered by the owner. He thanked our family for Diane's powerful statement, hoping it might change his ex's perspective. Sun America Life's lawyers were furious. Diane had posed questions that couldn't be answered truthfully, leaving the corporation vulnerable. The fact that a high school senior studying law had exposed their vulnerabilities was a bitter pill to swallow. They realized they were in serious trouble without a way out. The school principal called an emergency meeting for all teachers as soon as the school day ended on Friday, knowing the school would empty out quickly. Beaming with pride, he played the video of Diane speaking to the news reporters. Karen Wilson was impressed. Diane had taken her advice to heart, displaying remarkable focus, firmness, and strength. The principal then announced that the school had received 20 inquiries about Diane that day. She had been offered 2 grants if she pursued a career in law, and others were interested in sponsoring the school. He commended Mr. Jim Spears and Karen Wilson for their roles in Diane's success, praising Mr. Spears for his effective law teaching and Karen for her mentoring. Mira finally calmed down enough to call Diane's cell phone. However, a voice she didn't recognize answered and quickly ended the call, leaving Mira confused. She then tried to reach out to her daughters through Facebook, only to find that she had been unfriended and blocked by all of them. Desperate for connection, she called her parents home, only to be met with her father's clear rejection. He bluntly stated that, based on Diane's statement and the evidence provided by Will, they no longer recognized her as their daughter. Devastated, Mira decided not to go home and instead spent the night with her daughters at their grandfather's place. It provided them with a chance to regroup and gather themselves. Will informed Karen Wilson of their whereabouts to ensure they were safe. Sitting in his father's study, Will reflected on the revelations brought forth by his daughter's statements. His mother's words offered some comfort, reminding him that not everything in his marriage had been a lie and encouraging him to focus on the life he had before Mira became involved with Sylvia. What role did emotions play in all of this? I inquired. Do you believe their affair began out of genuine emotion? At first, it seemed like a friendship that evolved into desire, Mom explained. From what I gather, they were practically inseparable when Mira was at the head office. Spending so much time together naturally led to a deepening connection. Sometimes, under the influence of alcohol, boundaries blur and actions occur. Perhaps Mira sought solace in alcohol to cope with the guilt, allowing Sylvia to gradually manipulate her emotions. It often starts with innocent gestures of care. Are you suggesting Mira's actions were unintentional? I retorted, my voice rising. Not initially. No one plans to fall in love, it just happens, Mom replied. But in the end, she became deliberate. She likely didn't foresee the consequences of her actions. Otherwise, she wouldn't have handled the divorce this way. Mother, Mira had a plan from the start. They concocted a narrative, expecting us to buy into it. Their scheme was to gradually distance us until one day, I'd be served with divorce papers, I asserted. That way, Mira could conceal their relationship until after the divorce, keeping their secret safe. Once our daughters accepted the divorce, Sylvia would seamlessly enter the picture as a close friend. How do you know all this? Mom inquired, her tone serious. Her brother called me this morning after receiving evidence of Mira and Sylvia's 8-month relationship, I revealed. According to Mira, during her training, she discovered I was having an affair. Supposedly, we spent the last 2 months trying to reconcile, but she deemed it futile, which is why she decided to leave. Do your daughters know about this? Mom asked. We do now, came the simultaneous response from my 3 daughters. Both Mom and I turned to them, stunned. They had heard everything. Damn it, Dad, Mom was setting you up as the scapegoat, Dawn exclaimed. If she had succeeded, we would have believed her over you, Darcy added. She aimed to ruin our relationship with you. I glanced at my mother, who looked visibly shaken. I hurried to her side before she collapsed. Early Saturday morning, Dad and I decided to check on my home. Reporters were waiting for us upon our return. On impulse, we drove by the nearest dealership we owned and found more reporters gathered there. Thank goodness I shorted some of Sun America Life's common stock on Thursday. We'll need the funds for a new home, Dad remarked. Unless we find a way to shake off these hounds. Pull into the dealership, Dad. I'll go out and speak to them. What I say will surely reach Mira and her partner, I suggested. Let's give them something else to ponder. He parked, and I stepped out, ensuring our dealership's name was visible behind me in case I was being recorded. How are your daughters coping? An ABC reporter inquired. Like most children, I suppose. Initially, they blamed themselves. But as they begin to understand, they're questioning whether everything they were taught by their mother was a lie, I explained. They're looking to me for answers, and unfortunately, I have none. Some things simply cannot be explained away. How did you uncover the truth? The next question came. My wife messaged me 2 weeks ago last Friday, saying we needed to talk, I recounted. I asked where she was, and she replied she was on her way home. Something felt off, so I called her workplace. Let me play the conversation. They listened attentively. At the time, I still believed she was only the assistant branch manager, I explained. But when she got home, she claimed she had been pressured into going to corporate headquarters for 3 months to cover for a colleague on maternity leave. Now, we know none of that was true. On Friday, after my daughter's statement, my wife's brother called me to share what they had been told. I continued. According to Mira, she had discovered my alleged affair while at corporate for a month. She came home unexpectedly in a last-ditch attempt to salvage our marriage, but it didn't work, so she decided to leave me. It seems Sylvia Smith and Mira had plotted to make me the scapegoat, I elaborated. Mira planned to continue traveling back and forth, gradually making it seem like the distance was straining our relationship. She intended to file for divorce and have me served once it looked like I had given up. Then, once our daughters accepted the divorce, Sylvia would be introduced to them as a close friend. They were exposed when we discovered their duplicate Facebook pages. Do you believe they were trying to paint you as uncooperative? A reporter inquired. It seems that way. If they could blame me for the marriage breakdown, they could sever my ties with my parents and daughters permanently, I asserted. I'm not sure of their exact motives, but it seems they intended to use my daughters against me. Based on what I know, it certainly appears that way. Did Sylvia aim to introduce my daughters to the lesbian lifestyle, as she did with my wife? With that, I returned to my dad's car and climbed in. He wore a proud grin. Your year in commission sales has paid off, he remarked. You've raised questions they'll be grappling with for days without making direct accusations. You've positioned yourself as a father protecting his daughters. For the first time in days, I chuckled. Dad, there's no way any judge would allow Sylvia or Mira to talk to my girls without a third party present. Your portrayal of Sylvia as the aggressor puts extra pressure on the organization, her professionalism, and her personal relationships. Suggesting she might be a pedophile was a stroke of genius. It also shifts more responsibility onto the corporation itself, he observed. We made it home just in time to join the ladies for a late breakfast. We informed them about the reporters still stationed outside our home and dealership. Mom suggested a girls' day out of town for shopping, while Dad opted for golfing, knowing it wasn't my game. I decided to spend a few hours at the office. Dad offered me his truck, just in case they were watching for my car. As I was preparing to leave, Ms. Wilson called. She wanted to discuss the girls' return to school on Monday over lunch. I welcomed the idea of some company outside the family circle. I asked her to text me her address, and I'd pick her up. I mentioned I was dressed in blue jeans, to which she chuckled and said she was too. I arrived at Karen's place, and she welcomed me in. She mentioned she had recorded my statement to the media that morning and offered to show it to me. I gladly accepted. She played the recording, and I found it short, direct, and clear. It highlighted my lack of answers but demonstrated my awareness of the situation without understanding the motives behind it. It's been the talk of the town all day, raising questions about their behavior, Karen remarked. That recorded phone conversation reveals their deceitful conduct toward you, making you untouchable. I was simply trying to divert mass media attention away from my family, I explained. I'm driving my father's truck because reporters were camped outside our home last night, so we couldn't even go home. Do you have any preferences for lunch? Karen had a place in mind, offering us some privacy. She shared with me what had transpired at the school after I escorted my daughters out. I expressed my surprise, but mentioned that it was Diane's ambition to pursue a career in the legal field. Karen inquired about how the girls were coping. I admitted they had their moments of vulnerability. They were devastated to discover their mother's false accusations about me having an affair as the reason for our marriage ending. Karen empathized, and I likened the experience to understanding the challenges faced by political figures, where truth often takes a back seat to emotions. As for Mira and Sylvia, I emphasized the importance of maintaining pressure, as neither had shown willingness to tell the truth. We opted for a long walk in a nearby park before I dropped her off at her place. It felt good to have someone to confide in without fear of judgment, someone who offered unwavering support. Karen was becoming a true friend. Everyone was already back at Dad's place when I returned. The girls had enjoyed their day of shopping, and they all hugged me warmly. Darcy caught a whiff of perfume and whispered, "I smell a trace of a woman's perfume. Dad, who is she?" I simply replied, "Just a friend." Mom handed me a beer and suggested I retreat to the den to catch up on the news. "It's getting interesting," she said in a hushed tone. If you ever want to stir up trouble, just ask unanswerable questions. Liberals and socialists thrive on it. My brief statement had diverted attention from the political discourse of the day, now focusing on the morality of my family's situation. They were debating how the courts would perceive what many now saw as an attempt by Silva Smith and Mira Roberts to expose my daughters to the lesbian lifestyle. Would it be deemed corruption? Observers noted that the lesbian couple seemed intent on sabotaging my reputation. Sylvia was distraught. Her father had called about Myra's husband's statement, signaling an emergency board meeting. His concerns raised serious doubts. Mira and Sylvia watched the replay on TV, realizing the extent of the damage. Myra's husband's questions were damning, especially his inquiry into Sylvia's intentions regarding his children. The court order is the only thing keeping my career intact. Sylvia lamented. If they could, the board would fire me now. Myra's husband appears as a protective father, asking questions but offering no answers. He's made it seem like we planned everything, Mira admitted. It's my fault for not admitting I fell out of love with him long ago. I informed my father about your daughter's ages, Sylvia disclosed. Your husband was savvy, he knew how the media would spin it. But my mishandling of the situation led to this, Mira confessed. I lied to spare people's feelings. I'm getting what I deserve. You're innocent, we both know it. I pursued you because with you, I could be my true self. It took you longer to realize it than me, Sylvia acknowledged. I was drawn to you for years, but kept my distance. Meeting you in that gay bar signaled it was time to find out more. The night we spent together set me free, Mira recalled. The next morning, I knew I could never go back to living a lie. The consequences are yet to be determined, Sylvia remarked. Dean is hurt, understandably. Your conduct has your daughters questioning their identities. If you tell Dean the truth, he'll realize he was nothing more than a pawn in your game. Such truths have shattered men and driven some to suicide. But I do care for him, though I was never truly in love with him, Mira admitted. That's what women caught red-handed often say to justify their actions, Sylvia remarked. But words won't fix this mess. Right now, all you're doing is digging yourself deeper. What am I supposed to do? I still want a relationship with my daughters. Dean will always be a part of their lives, Mira pleaded. We need to find a way to work through this. Your family now knows what Dean knows. You made it worse by lying and shifting blame onto him, Sylvia pointed out. He's not retaliating out of spite, but because you left him no choice. You smeared his name to protect yours. Your daughters see you tearing the family apart just to be with me. Sylvia watched as Mira fell silent, lost in thought. Myra's actions had irreversibly altered relationships and lives. The tragedy was that Mira had always seen Dean as a brother, not a lover. When they made love, Dean gave his all, physically, emotionally, mentally. To him, it was an act of love. But to Mira, it was merely fulfilling an urge. Sylvia pitied Dean, he didn't deserve any of this. Suddenly, Sylvia noticed a swarm of media in front of their house. Dean and Diane had succeeded in diverting the media's attention to them. I walked into the real estate office, surprised to find it open on a Sunday. Amy Bronson recognized me immediately, we had gone to school together. I requested some comparables for houses similar to mine in the local market, and she quickly provided them. I decided to list my house for $20,000 above the average price. Amy agreed to liaise directly with my wife. As I signed the paperwork, I provided Amy with a handwritten letter granting my wife access to take what she wanted from the house before it was sold. I assured her that my daughters and I would have removed our belongings by the end of the week. Anything left behind would be included with the house. I expressed my desire for a 4-bedroom house with a pool, some land, and privacy. Is the house solely in your name, or do I need your permission to sell it? Amy inquired. It's in my name only, so inform her that the funds will be held in trust with my lawyers until the divorce is finalized, I responded. I won't give her any opportunity to sue me. I want this done and over with. Mira has hurt us enough. Besides, it's a 50-50 split state anyway. As Dean left, Amy couldn't help but notice the weight of pain he carried. If Mira had been a lesbian all along, she hid it well. And if it was just an affair, why broadcast it on Facebook? The whole situation was nonsensical, and sadly, Dean would carry the burden for the rest of his days. Alone in my office early Monday morning, I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the phone rang. A man's voice replied, "I'd like to speak with Dean James Roberts, please." "You're speaking to him," I confirmed. "May I ask who's calling?" "I'm Charles Anthony Smith, chairman of the board of Sun America Life, and if you agree, I'd like to have a conversation with you off the record," he proposed. "What's this about?" I inquired. "Keeping this situation, created by my daughter and your wife, out of the media," he explained. "We didn't initiate the release of any material, it was already public record in the county. My daughter and I were simply trying to defuse the situation. As of this morning, it seems we can return home since the media appears to have dispersed," I informed him. "I was under the impression that our legal team had organized it," he stated. "Could you explain what happened on Friday?" Around 11 that morning, Karen Wilson, acting as their guidance counselor at my request, alerted me to the presence of 3 or 4 news teams at our doorstep. She advised me to remove them from school, I recounted. That was our first indication of any issue. The school requested us to try to resolve the situation as it was disrupting classes, I continued. My eldest made the statement, and then we left. I had no prior knowledge of what she was going to say. Once we left, so did they. Your daughter was resolute and composed. Her words were primarily directed at her mother. "You should be proud," Charles Smith remarked. She posed questions, much like you, that are difficult to answer, but both were intended to highlight the implications of their actions to both my daughter and your wife. It's undoubtedly a complicated situation. The lies being told were self-serving. It was calculated and planned. Just so you're aware, I obtained signed affidavits from Myra's family, stating that she left me upon discovering I was having an affair while she was in Maryland. Her recent trip home was a 2-month leave of absence to attempt to salvage our marriage, I disclosed. Did you know I have 6 pages of email exchanges between your daughter and my wife over the course of 5 days, all from their company email addresses, essentially orchestrating a deception to make me believe Mira was pressured into accepting a temporary position at the head office? To be honest, I had no idea. I'm about to enter a board meeting on this matter, Charles Smith admitted. I wasn't even aware of their relationship until this came to light. Now I understand why both you and your daughter raised the questions you did. If I were in your shoes, I'd do the same. As for the court order preventing us from terminating their employment, was it you or your daughter who requested it? I must say, your daughter Diane, she's in grade 12 and chose law as an elective, I mentioned proudly. Tell her I'm not fond of having my hands tied, he chuckled. She made our legal team look like amateurs. If it weren't for the court order, both Sylvia and Mira would be out the door by now. I appreciate our conversation. Now I can be forthcoming with what I know. My grin widened as Rebecca entered the room, so I had to share the reason. Dean, keep in mind he might have been testing you with false information, Rebecca cautioned. That's precisely why I disclosed the emails between Sylvia and Mira. If he's aware of them and learns I possess copies, it strengthens the case that they colluded to deceive me. If not, he'll soon have copies in hand, I clarified. He can't prove we orchestrated the media involvement, otherwise, it would have surfaced through the media itself. Dean, tread carefully, they'll be searching for any legal loophole to wriggle out of this, Rebecca reminded me. Amy Bronson had just finished speaking with Mira Roberts on the phone. Surprisingly, the call went smoothly, both remained professional. Amy sensed Myra's surprise upon learning about the house sale. She emphasized the need for Mira to swiftly remove her belongings after the upcoming weekend, as she needed clarity on what was included in the house sale. Mira also discovered that post-sale, the check would be made out to the lawyers, to be held until the divorce concluded. Amy refrained from commenting on Dean's handling of the situation, but made it clear that Dean and their daughters were forced to vacate due to media pressure. Amy wanted Mira to grasp the extent of the damage she was inflicting on her family. The board of directors had convened in a closed-door meeting for hours. Share values continued to plummet. The head of their legal team meticulously guided them through every detail. It was evident that as long as the court cases remained unresolved, termination of Sylvia and Mira was off the table. They couldn't even transfer them to different positions. The board resolved to attempt mediation first before resorting to litigation on all matters except Mira and Dean Roberts' divorce. A statement would be drafted for release to the media to mitigate the situation. Navigating through the mass media frenzy to exit their driveway was a nightmare for the two women in love. An image of Mira, captured with a shocked expression, circulated on Instagram with the caption "The moment you're caught," leading to a full-page story in the papers sourced by unnamed individuals. Mira discovered from the reports that her family wanted nothing to do with her due to the fallout from her actions. Sylvia acknowledged that it would take time for things to settle before they could begin to work through the situation. Receiving an advance copy of Sun America Life's statement surprised me. It revealed that the board of directors admitted to retaining Sylvia and Mira solely due to the court order, pending resolution of the legal issues. The statement attempted to sway public opinion while condemning any attempt to corrupt a minor. The ongoing situation underscored the urgent need for resolution, prompting immediate mediation. I contacted my dad, who wisely sold his stock upon receiving the order. It proved to be the right decision. When I picked up my daughters, we found ourselves no longer on the front page. The focus had shifted. We returned to our house and began packing our belongings, a painful process as my daughters left behind items given by their mother. Rebecca's insight proved accurate. Their wounds ran deep, and healing would be a lengthy process, if at all. We planned to stay with my parents until finding a new home, as the current one held too many painful memories. It took us until Friday to complete the packing, and on Saturday, Dad and I moved everything into storage. Somehow, we were managing to survive. Sylvia was furious with her father for the board's decision to abandon them. Upon learning that they would be terminated once the cases concluded, both Mira and Sylvia began searching for new jobs, with little success thus far. During Saturday morning house hunting with my daughters and Amy Bronson, I learned that Mira would be arriving the following weekend to pack up her belongings. Most potential buyers preferred to wait and see what remained before making any decisions. That night, I broke the news to my daughters. On Sunday, my three girls went out, driven by Diane, while Karen Wilson and I enjoyed an afternoon lunch. I had received information from Sylvia's father that Mira and Sylvia would be visiting the next Friday. I was concerned that my headstrong daughter might confront her mother. Karen and I decided to stroll through a mall to check out the furniture styles and quality in the retail market. That's when we unexpectedly bumped into Jace and Janet Sexsmith, Myra's parents. We ended up grabbing coffee and sitting together, both families equally devastated by recent events. I introduced Karen to them, explaining our relationship. During our conversation, I was touched to learn that my daughters had expressed concern for me to Karen. All of us, including Myra's parents, were moved by this revelation. We acknowledged that if Mira indeed identified as a lesbian, it was something none of us had previously known. I mentioned that my children were wondering why they hadn't heard from their grandparents, and I understood that they were trying to avoid reminding the kids of their mother by keeping their distance. On Thursday, Amy Bronson took Karen and me to see a newly listed property on the market. It boasted 5 bedrooms, including 2 master suites, a built-in pool with an outdoor kitchen, a 3-bay garage, and an open-floor concept that I immediately fell in love with. The property, available due to an estate sale, also included acreage. I made an offer on the spot. Late Friday night, Sylvia and Mira flew in. They opted for a taxi to our former home. To their surprise, my daughters had left them a message. Among a pile of cut-up photographs, they had placed all the sentimental items Mira had bought for them. It was a clear message. Saturday evening, Karen, the kids, and I were having dinner at Ruby Tuesdays when I spotted Mira and presumably Sylvia entering. Diane, my daughter, was in the restroom and missed seeing them get seated. As Diane passed by their table, Mira said something that prompted her to leave in tears. Karen, with Sylvia watching, leaned in and gave me a meaningful kiss. Later, we found out that Mira had attempted to reach out to her family, but it was too soon for them to respond. Mediation proved futile, so we headed to court. Sun America Life successfully appealed the court order, winning on the grounds of publicly admitting responsibility. The court acknowledged their accountability. The only remaining question was the extent of it. Sylvia and Mira were promptly escorted out of the corporate building with their belongings the following day, while her father was compelled to resign as chairman of the board. Despite the legal drama, Karen and I managed to finalize the purchase of the house. My daughters were ecstatic about it. With Karen's help, we selected the colors and had some of the floors redone to our liking. Meanwhile, my divorce proceedings were progressing smoothly. The old house was swiftly bought by an anonymous buyer for the full asking price, ensuring a quick closure. Once the paperwork was signed, the funds were held in trust by the lawyers. Sun America Life opted for a judge-only trial, which lasted just a day. The judge was unimpressed by the corporation's attempt to downplay their responsibility, emphasizing that they couldn't control individuals' personal conduct. Our legal team argued that Sylvia Smith's position created an illusion of power, influencing the situation significantly. When the proceedings concluded, Sun America Life faced substantial losses. Each of my daughters received $500,000, plus court costs, while I was awarded $2 million, twice the amount my lawyers had initially considered in mediation. The divorce itself proceeded uncontested, with my ex-wife being granted half of our net worth as per state law. Curiously, she never appeared in court. It later emerged that the new owners of my previous home were Sylvia and Mira, who had successfully sued their former employer and emerged victorious. As for Karen and me, we were simply taking things one day at a time.